Members, there is a quorum. I call to order the meeting. Item 1, information papers issued since last meeting. Those papers have been set out on the agenda. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. The next regular meeting will be held at 2:30 p.m. on 14th July. There are 2 proposed discussion items. 1, development of Cheung Kwan O Area 137. Funding proposal in relation to developments in the area, and also item 2, implementation of the title registration system. If that's agreed, we move on to the next item. Is dedicated legislation to accelerate the development of the Northern Metropolis. First of all, a very warm welcome to the government officials attending the item. I will now introduce them one by one. Secretary for Development, please. Good afternoon, Chairman and members. You may remember that back in March this year, we have briefed members on the dedicated legislation for the Northern Metropolis. Subsequently, we have held a 2-month-long public consultation. We have received overwhelming support from the public. Today, we would like to report to members concerning the outcome of the public consultation exercise, as well as our proposed amendments. We will seek to introduce the bill in July and have it passed by the end of the year. This aggressive timetable is to highlight our determination to expedite the development of the Northern Metropolis. Now, concerning the dedicated Northern Metropolis legislation, we tend to call it the Bill on Accelerating the Development of the Northern Metropolis. Now, before I defer to my colleague, I would like to highlight the characteristics of the legislation. First of all, this is a very targeted piece of legislation. We are targeting the Northern Metropolis as the future growth engine for Hong Kong. We have now entered into a stage where large-scale construction projects are taking place, and also industries are entering the Northern Metropolis. As a result, at this stage, we need to facilitate the delivery of these works and also take care of the needs of various industries. In terms of setting the planning parameters and land uses, as well as meeting the needs of the operation of industries, we would like to implement flexible arrangements and remove barriers. So at this stage, we are very targeted on meeting the needs of the Northern Metropolis developments. And second, there will be a principal ordinance setting the legislative framework for the legislation. The purview spans across different bureaus and developments. As a result, we have the representatives from many departments today, showing that we are working as a team. Now, after enacting the principal legislation, we will specify the specific measures through subsidiary legislation. And in July, when we introduce the bill, there will be an additional measure. Now, for the parts of the subsidiary legislation having overwhelming support, we will produce a draft for those subsidiary legislation so as to give the members an idea. But of course, those subsidiary legislation will only be enacted after the principal legislation is passed. Third, since we are picking up speed on developing the Northern Metropolis, the future bill on accelerating the development of the NM will be focused on streamlining controls. But it doesn't mean that there will be no control. There will be gatekeeping. By streamlining, it doesn't mean that we are just blindly endorsing every application. At different stage of the application process, including application for construction noise permits, the regulatory authority will be the gatekeepers. Now, I would like to invite the director of the Northern Metropolis office to give us a brief report. Thank you, Chairman. Now, allow me to brief members on the outcome of the public consultation exercise. It was a 2-month-long consultation. We have met with 20 organizations in 13 briefing sessions. We have received 48 written submissions through our website and by email. The majority of the views are supportive of our move to legislate for accelerating the development of the Northern Metropolis, and we have also made some adjustments according to the suggestions received. Now, as the Secretary has mentioned, the framework would be one comprising a principle, ordinance, as well as subsidiary legislation, and the law will only apply to the Northern Metropolis only. There will be 6 policy areas under the bill, just like we have reported to the panel. Now, very briefly, the first 5 policy areas, the drafts are already largely completed, so those drafts will be submitted to members when the bill is introduced. Now, we'll move on to the views received as well as our responses. First of all, on the applicable areas. Now, many respondents queried whether the legislation would apply to areas beyond the Northern Metropolis. Now, our response is that at this stage, we do not intend to extend the applicable areas of the proposed legislation beyond the Northern Metropolis, as the Northern Metropolis development poses strategic significance with its own uniqueness and imminence. And also, the 15th Five-Year Plan explicitly requires accelerating the NM development, so the legislation will only apply to the Northern Metropolis. It will mainly follow the area boundaries of the Yuen Long District and North Districts, as well as the OZPs, or outline zoning plans, falling within the aforementioned area boundaries. Now, in the future, when necessary, the Chief Executive may only amend the coverage of the Northern Metropolis by Gazette notice if the boundaries of the Yuen Long and North Districts or the relevant OZPs are amended. In other words, the area boundaries of Northern Metropolis have been set clearly. The second area of views involves streamlining town planning procedures. And there will be streamlining measures for non-conservation areas. There are views agreeing with our direction, but there are also views that we should narrow down the area. Now, having considered the diverse views, we think that our current proposal, that is to streamline the control measures for non-conservation areas, is appropriate. Application will still need to go through technical assessments, and the TPB, or Town Planning Board, will still be the gatekeeper. So we think our proposal has already struck a balance between conservation and development, and even without the streamlining procedures, there can still be developments which will go through the existing mechanism under the Town Planning Ordinance. There are also views concerning approving too many temporary uses, and there will be too many brownfield site operations. Now again, the Town Planning Board will be the gatekeeper. Now the third area is about expediting compensation payments for land resumed. Now, we anticipate that some former owners may refer compensation cases to the Lands Tribunal. So originally, we have proposed to set a time limit of 6 months to refer the cases to the Lands Tribunal. Now, some stakeholders consider that by stipulating a time limit, it may cause some former owners to worry that they would miss out, so they would submit a case to the Lands Tribunal in advance. So having considered that, we recommend to remove the proposal to set a 6-month time limit for referring compensation cases to the Lands Tribunal to avoid adding to the caseload burden of the Lands Tribunal. Now, even without the 6-month time limit, with our other proposals, we should be able to conclude the compensations and reduce interest payments by the government. And also, this will not affect the government's pace in resumption of land, because the government can still resume the land no matter whether compensations have been agreed. Now, originally, we have also proposed stipulating a time limit of 3 months for accepting provisional payments, with interest payments. We would like to encourage former owners to accept the provisional payment, so we have set a time limit of 3 months. Beyond that, no interest payments would be made by the government. There were views that the time limit of 3 months would be too rigid for some former owners who would have difficulties to accept the provisional payments due to practical challenges. So we will instead empower the lands departments to extend the relevant time limits on a case-by-case basis. For example, some former owners may have passed away and the descendants will need time to apply for the letter of administration. So on these cases, the 3 months time limits can be extended. Next, concerning chos and tongs. So our proposal is that we will make compensation payments for land resumed to the registered managers of chos and tongs with no vacancy in the office of registered managers. Now, there are views suggesting that we should extend the proposal to those chos and tongs with vacancies of registered managers. Now, we consider that if there are vacancies of registered managers for the chos and tongs, they should be dealt with under the established mechanism first, before compensation is disbursed. Moving on to the next area, construction technology. Most respondents supported our proposals. They suggest that besides innovation, for building design and construction of quality and conducive to promoting sustainable development, they should also be encouraged. So we agree that other than innovative building designs, technologies, and materials, the enhancements in quality, sustainability, and functionality of the design and construction should also be considered by the Buildings Department when considering an application for modification or exemption. And also, the considerations should be published on the BD's website for inspection. On construction noise permits, now the streamlining proposal will be limited to the applicable areas in new development areas that are industry-driven and major transport infrastructure projects. There are views that we should narrow down the scope of application, while some suggest us to widen it. Now, having considered these views, we consider that we will maintain the arrangements to new development areas like Lao Shan and Hon Judy, because these are areas with more urgent developmental needs. And also, we will include the Sandy Ridge data cluster under this arrangement too. Now, we will list out the transportation infrastructure projects, which will also be covered under the streamlining arrangements for construction noise permits. Now, concerning cross-boundary flow or productivity factors, now there are views that we should extend the arrangements beyond Hetao. In the future, if there is such need, we will extend the arrangements to other areas. Now, some ask about the details of the white list. The Hetao area will be a boundary control point. There will be a white list to facilitate expeditious customs clearance.
So regarding the flow of materials, we will also make a refinement. For the Hon Judy CHAN Kapui Railway and Northern Link Spur Line, we will liaise with the Shenzhen side. We will facilitate connection, and we will also add provisions to mandate some national recognized standards. The standards of certain construction machinery will have to align with the national standards, that is Guobiao. The last one is the establishment of statutory corporations. We have taken note of the public views, and we will give due consideration to their views. We aim to introduce the bill to the Legislative Council in July this year, and we want to secure the passage of the bill within this year. The floor is now open for members to ask questions. The lineup is Ms. Christine Fong, Mr. Ray Wong, Mr. Lau Ka-keung, Mr. Lam Chin Sing, Mr. Tam Chen Kwok, Mr. Liu Ming, Mr. Mark Chong, Mr. Aaron Bok, Mr. Michael Lee, Ms. Elaine Chick, Dr. Ben Chen, Ms. Kwok Fu Yung, Ms. Julia Lau, and Professor Priscilla Leung. 14 members in total. After Mr. Lau speaks, I will draw a line. Each member 4 minutes. We have a tight schedule today, so you have to finish your questions by the 3-minute mark. Otherwise, I will ask the administration to reply in a very concise manner. Thank you. Ms. Christine Fong. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the development of the Northern Metropolis as well as the taking forward of the dedicated legislation of the NM, I give my full support. 3,000 hectares of land are involved. That is about 1/3 of Hong Kong. We need to take forward this project in phases. The Northern Metropolis covers a wide range of areas: Sandy Ridge, Yuen Long, the Loop area, and so on. Can we give the public a better grasp of the Northern Metropolis by giving different areas certain names? After all, the N name covers an expansive area. I understand that the administration wants to streamline the procedures. The administration also wants to simplify the procedures in relation to OZP, that is Outline Zoning Plan. We should take a multi-pronged approach. New territories, east and north, these are important places. But what about Sai Kung, Chan Kwan No? I received views from residents in relation to the subsidy grant regarding urban-rural integration. The amount of subsidy totals $200 million. We need to expedite the grant. When we develop a large community, I know that in the new territories there are a lot of niches. Are you going to liaise with the register managers of Chotong Land, or will you proactively provide assistance? you need to promote urban-rural integration. Ms. Fong, you asked 3 questions. 1 question on urban-rural integration. So I ask that you only ask the question on urban-rural integration in the next agenda item. This agenda item only concerns the Northern Metropolis. Thank you. Secretary. The Northern Metropolis is about 30,000 hectares large. Half of the Shenzhen Bay is within the territory of Hong Kong. There are clear provisions in relation to the definition of the Northern Metropolis, that is, the demarcation of the boundaries of the NM. Regarding different places of the Northern Metropolis, we have already given names to different areas in the NDA's new development areas. In the North New Territories areas, they are indeed very large. It's difficult to pinpoint an exact area by referring to just New Territories North. When it comes to streamlining the town planning ordinance, that is, the application for CNP construction noise permits, this is indeed a good measure, so why don't we apply it to the entire Hong Kong? When we allow simplification or streamlining, there is actually give and take. In the Northern Metropolis, there are conditions for us to do so. The reason why we can streamline town planning ordinance is that when it comes to transportation, environmental capacity, these areas are stronger in the Northern Metropolis, so we need not worry about those in the Northern Metropolis. They will not be affected. That's why we could streamline the procedures. The same applies to construction noise. But if we implement these measures in other areas that may cause concerns among members of the public in that area, that is why we adopt a pragmatic approach. We will see how the situation pans out in the future. We will take the first step first. Regarding ancient graves, I understand members' point. For Pak Nai and Chin Pei Choi, there are a lot of burial zones. There are also a lot of recreational zones. We can indeed beautify these areas, and this is exactly the direction that we want to pursue. Next member, please. Mr. Ray Wong, I have 3 suggestions. 1, we need to adopt an industry-driven approach when it comes to streamlining of procedures. I agree that we shorten the time from 9 months to 2 months. However, when it comes to land leases and infrastructure, we need a cross-departmental pre-approval mechanism. We need to allow research and development and manufacture within the same building, just upstairs and downstairs. We need to meet the modern industrial needs. Regarding cross-boundary flow of production factors, we need to have a clear roadmap. We also need a white list. There is no announcement yet in relation to the flow of materials and capital. I urge that the administration extend the white list to the Santine Technopole. Sandy Ridge should be made the first pilot area for cross-boundary flow of data. We need a green channel to connect all these areas. Legislation allows the use of innovation or innovative materials. In any case, I agree. I suggest that restrictions be relaxed when it comes to construction projects. The Northern Metropolis should align its standards with our recognized national standards. We need to enhance the overall engineering or construction efficiency. I look forward to ongoing liaison between the administration and the industry when the administration introduces the bill to the Council in July. Thank you. Secretary, 3 questions. Well, I believe we can note some of the views expressed by member. Member is concerned about the streamlined procedures and their impacts on construction plans. We have already set up a dedicated office for any private construction projects inside the Northern Metropolis. There is a committee chaired by the permanent secretary of the Bureau. When KPIs are not met, directors of the relevant departments will be mobilized in order to iron out the issues regarding cross-boundary flow of productivity factors. We need to make it convenient for people to move across the boundary. There will be a new port in the loop area to make it convenient for people to move across the boundary. For other productivity factors, such as materials and data, in due course, when conditions are mature, we're going to introduce this by way of subsidiary legislation, but we will put in place some pilot areas in order to test it out. Regarding innovative and new construction materials, indeed we have our own goals. A lot of projects or construction projects will take place inside the Northern Metropolis. We want to seize this opportunity for Hong Kong to lead the standard of the GBA. Just recently, we have already signed an agreement with the Guangdong side and will continue to pursue this development in this direction. Thank you. Mr. Lau Ka-keung. The administration has conducted consultation with members of the public. The administration has also made refinements in light of public views. I support the relevant proposals. I look forward to the bill being passed in order to streamline the procedures regarding the development of the Northern Metropolis. The administration touches upon streamlining town planning ordinance, including extending the period for provisional use from 3 years to 7 years. As I understand, quite many brownfield sites are used as storage for goods containers and open-air storage of goods. Some members of the public are worried that the provisional use may be made permanent. I hope that the administration will tell us more about this. The Town Planning Board will be a gatekeeper in relation to the timeline. However, 7 years, this is actually bordering on the timeline of a medium plan. I'd like to know how the administration is going to handle issues in relation to brownfield sites. What about the introduction of new construction materials or technologies? Do you only need to obtain approval from the Buildings Department before you can apply for exemptions? I'd like to know what procedures you will have to go through in order to obtain an approval from the Buildings Department regarding the quality-based approach. Thank you.
Chairman, concerning streamlining town planning control, one proposal is to amend the definition for temporary uses from 3 years to 7 years. The member is right. Many brownfield site operations take place on private land with town planning approval. Now, not every use will get a 7-year-long temporary use. It will only be granted upon application and consideration by the TPB. Now, basically, brownfield site operations are supporting our economic development as well as development of industries. Now, having resumed land before new industries move in, brownfield site operations may continue. We will provide spaces for operations for brownfield site operations in the interim, but the long-term solution should be upgrading and transformation. Now, there's industry sites in the Northern Metropolis as well as the sites at Long Gu Tan. There will be spaces available for those brownfield site operators who are willing to transform and upgrade their operations. However, they do need our assistance during this interim period. So by extending the maximum period for temporary users from 3 years to 7 years, this is how we are assisting them. Now, we are also adopting the 1.5 level development model adopted by the mainland. Now, if the temporary uses are only 2 to 3 years long, that may deter some potential investors. Concerning approval on the use of innovative construction materials and methods by the Buildings Department, the focus is on quality. For example, an innovative or unconventional pile driving method. Under the existing mechanism, we need the applicants to prove that the conventional method is not applicable to the particular site because of the geographical or the geological condition. In the future, we won't need the applicants to make that justification. As long as that is a better construction method, the director will have the power to grant the approval for the use of that construction method. I will now draw a line. For those members who haven't yet pressed the button, please do so now. Mr. Lam Chun Sing. Thank you. We have discussed the dedicated legislation 3 months ago concerning the 6 major policy areas. We have already given our views. So today's is a focused discussion on the adjustments after the consultation process. And concerning allowing the use of innovative construction methods, you have extended the scope for those meeting your criteria. Those materials or methods can be used. That includes sustainability and functionality of the technologies. So can you give us some examples? Do you have anything or a particular technology in mind? On sustainability, does it mean eco-friendliness? If the technology is eco-friendly, then even if the technology falls short in other assessment areas, will you still approve the application? Now about the Hon Judy CHAN Western Rail Link and also the Northern Link spur line, some construction machineries and equipment will be exempted. So the use of these machineries will be in compliance with our own law as well as the Guobiao. Now, if it meets the standard under our own law, then even though they are not recognized by Guobiao, they can still be used. So are you focusing on machineries recognized by the Guobiao national standard, but not approved under our legislation? Do you have a list of such construction machineries and equipment? Now, although there should be an exemption, but there should be standards concerning the safety as well as the efficiency of those machineries. Some technical matters, Secretary. Now, for the first question, I will defer to the Deputy Director of the Buildings Department concerning the use of construction machinery. I will defer to the Deputy Secretary. Deputy Director, thank you. Concerning sustainability, for example, there are some hollowed-out design in a building. Now, according to the existing legislation, we have to calculate the gross floor area for each level. Now, under the existing mechanism, the hollowed-out part is not exempted. Now, in the future, if the applicants can prove that the hollowed-out design is for better ventilation and better aesthetic with greening design, then we will give an exemption for the hollowed-out parts to be calculated towards the gross floor area. Concerning functionality, different buildings have different uses. Now, for instance, if it is a building for logistic operations, then the floor height needs to be taller, for example, 4 to 5 meters. So we will consider whether there is a need for the building to have a higher floor height. If the applicants can prove that this is a logistics center and require a taller floor height, we will give the approval. Deputy Secretary, thank you. Concerning the 2 cross-boundary railway projects, concerning the labeling requirements for construction machineries, we are referring to 国标 or GB standard. Now, for cross-boundary projects, the project may start in Shenzhen and extend to Hong Kong. So there is little reason to require the builders to use different machineries on the other parts of the railway. And we have studied and confirmed that the 国标 standards are compatible with our own legislation. Now, of course, for those machineries with both 国标 and Hong Kong's recognition, they can be used. We will identify more measures to allow seamless transition from one part of the project to the other. Mr. Tam Chen Kwok, I thank the government for accepting the views received during the consultation and make the legislation more down to earth. Now, the greatest consensus is to remove barriers for the development of the Northern Metropolis through dedicated legislation. I look forward to the passage of this law and introduce an innovative mindset in the NM's development. That will attract more private investors and allow the public to share the fruits of the NM's development sooner. Now, cross-boundary flow of productivity factors is key. Now, on the last occasion, I suggested extending the white list arrangements to the sentinel pole as well as the timetable for implementing the other measures. Now, the paper has mentioned this as well. It says the government is working with the mainland authorities on the implementation details. So can the government update us on the progress of discussion? Among the 4 productivity factors, flow of people is the easier one. For the other 3, they will have to be implemented through subsidiary legislation on a pilot basis. So what will the priority be? We always talk about introducing and attracting businesses and capital. So cross-boundary flow of capital is of utmost importance. Now, the Sandy Ridge Data Park will be commissioned in 3 years' time. So will the arrangements for cross-boundary data flow be aligned with the developments of the Sandy Ridge development? Now, concerning the flow of the 4 factors, the ITIB is the beneficiary of these policies, so I would defer to Ms. Zheng. Undersecretary, Mr. Lilian Zhong. I thank the member for his suggestions on the last occasion. Now, among the flow of the four factors, very soon, with the introduction of the subsidiary legislation, we will be able to allow cross-boundary flow of personnel. So that will be focused on personnel who need to travel across the area on a daily basis. Now, concerning data, we are now discussing the matter with the Shenzhen municipal government as well as ministries. Progresses have been made. Now, the two governments have submitted a joint implementation plan to the ministry. Now, last week, Director Xia Baolong has visited the Hetao area himself to direct its development. We are now conducting a series of work, including collecting views from the industries who have moved into the Shenzhen and Hong Kong Park concerning the operational needs. For example, the need of cross-boundary flow of sensitive biosamples as well as biological data. Now, we will work on the workflow, for example, the information to be submitted and also how the data is to be handled after the transfer. We will strive to implement the arrangements on a pilot basis within the year. So in terms of the priority, we are giving priority to those industries which have already moved into the park. Now, concerning cross-boundary flow of capital, this is a huge concern as well, so we have been actively discussing that matter with the ministries. Mr. Yu Ming. Thank you, Chairman. We welcome the inclusion of the major transport infrastructure projects, including the Northern Link, Main Line and Spur Line, as well as the Western Rail Link, Hon Judy CHAN Kapui, under the streamlining procedures for construction noise permit. Now, but that doesn't mean that we are lowering the standard of control. So I would like to know, how much faster we can complete these projects with the streamlined procedures. If there are complaints from residents concerning construction noises, will the Environmental Protection Departments be responsible for that? Now, concerning professional compensation and the relevant arrangements, now the Secretary said the government would provide as much assistance as possible. However, if some former owners have difficulties in accepting the professional compensation, for example, for chos and tongs with vacancies in registered managers, what will the government do? And how many cases do you expect will fall under this category? Now, in the past, the title checks took a long time. Now, in recent times, the government has been enlisting the help from the private sector to conduct title checks, so the speed has been increased by 40%. In the past, some former owners did not receive compensation after 2 years' time because of the long title check.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the EPD to reply to your question regarding the construction noise permit. Regarding expedited compensation payment and savings on interest, we want the parties involved to accept the compensation payment within 3 months. and we will continue to allow the calculation of interest for the part on which that has not been agreed. There is still flexibility in the 3 months. If parties can provide a reason and apply to extend the period, the Director of Land does have the discretion to grant an extension. Take the Register Manager as an example. We may grant an extension if the Register Manager is seeking the next Registered Manager. The Lands Department, within 1 year, has already doubled the quantity of title checks. And we have also seen an increase in efficiency by 40%. But how much exactly? I'd like to give the floor to the Lands Department to give you more concrete information. Lands Department, thank you. Regarding title checks, we aim to verify the owner of the title. When they come to apply for compensation, we want to verify the identity of that person first. In the past few years, we have already streamlined many of our procedures. We have also made public many requirements of our own. We have issued circulars, for instance. We have enhanced transparency of the procedures. But after all, the resumption of every piece of land has to do with the different nature of the titles as well as their complexity. That is why it's difficult for me to give you a one-size-fits-all answer. There are differences in different cases. If a title is clean, we may be able to disperse the payment very fast. However, sometimes we do have difficulties. For some Chotong land, it's not whether we have a registered manager or we have any opposition. However, concerning some cases, there are indeed litigations that's beyond our control. Probably it's been 1.5 years and there are disputes among individuals, and this explains the differences in the time that it takes to handle an application. We have already streamlined the procedures, and we have made comparisons of our data, and we have seen quite notable improvements. We'll continue to work on this. Regarding construction noise, I'd like to ask Dr. Vanessa Au to give you more information. Thank you. Indeed, with a CNP construction noise permit, we aim to streamline the procedures. However, the criteria or the requirements remain unchanged. So in addition to the streamlining of procedures, we have added a real-time noise monitoring or surveillance. Our aim is to protect members of the public from noise in the community. Members of the public can make a complaint to the EPD if they suffer from nuisance from noise. The project proponent needs to liaise with members of the public in the community. When they conduct nighttime procedures, they need to explain to the public the reason why they need to really conduct this work. We need to let members of the public know the reality, and this will reduce disputes between the project proponents and residents nearby. If need be, in accordance with law, we will also conduct inspections and surveillance. Whenever there is any non-compliance, we will also initiate prosecution. Thank you. Mr. Mark Chong. The Hon Judy CHAN Kapui Railway has to do with the factors of production of personnel from Tianhai to Shenzhen Bay and finally to Hong Kong. There is some boring or excavation. The tunnel beneath the ground is being excavated. It doesn't pass through the land boundary control point in Hong Kong. I'd like to ask about mainland construction workers if they use new innovative construction technologies that Hong Kong doesn't have yet. Are these construction workers subject to construction technology arrangements applicable to the cross-boundary flow of personnel? I'd like to ask about the CNP. In some new development areas, NDAs, there are many residents and therefore it is easier to sort out the problem. This time round, you cover major transportation projects as well, one of which is in the Hon Judy station on the Tuen Ma line. There are Tuen Mun, Yuen Long, Hon Judy, and different estates. These estates have a large number of residents, and for the main line of the Northern Link, such as Kam Sheung Road Station, many members of the public have already moved into multiple estates. Are you going to take the Hon Judy station off the list or the main line of Northern Link? Before we have this new legislation, they have already provided us with a timetable, so we have an impression or an understanding of when these projects will be completed. I'd also like to ask about establishing statutory corporations. We have Hon Judy New Development Park Company. We also have other companies. In the Northern Metropolis, there is yet another statutory corporation. I'd like to know the link between the Industrial Park Company and these statutory corporations. Why do you still need to establish a statutory corporation if you have relevant other resources? Thank you. I'd like to ask the TLB to provide you with more information. Regarding your second question, member just now referred to the fact that some people are living in the rural area. So is it possible for us to take it off our bill? Our basic principle is that we want to expedite the construction projects. If we, however, sit on our hands, whenever there are people living near the construction project, we definitely cannot proceed forward, and they will not be able to benefit from the construction noise permit requirements. That is not what we want to achieve. I have to emphasize the authority that is, for instance, the EPD in this case must require the relevant applicant to pick the nearest residential area. They will have to propose mitigating measures. However, unlike the past, one doesn't have to detail the exact number of machinery to be put inside that area. However, if we take it off the list, it cannot achieve what it intends to achieve. Through the principal legislation, we want to provide provisions. If need be, the CE in Council will set up a statutory corporation in accordance with subsidiary legislation. At present, we have no concrete plan to set up a statutory corporation. We have been very direct and forthcoming. Companies who want to start earlier can enjoy such benefits, they can start their operation earlier. We want to keep flexibility. Will there be new statutory corporations? At present, we do not have such a plan. Mr. Eddie Lee, thank you. I'll be quick. As for the flow of personnel, we have had an effective administrative mechanism to handle the cross-boundary arrangements. We also need to make sure that they meet the relevant ordinances, such as the Occupational Safety Health Ordinance, Insurance Management, and so on. Regarding innovative technologies, many types of works are subject to the regulation of the Buildings Ordinance. Thank you. The estate near Hon Judy is not just an ordinary estate. It is one that has to do with the government. That is public rental housing. I'd like to know how much time will be saved. Well, Mr. Mark Chung, you have already stated your views. Thank you. Mr. Aaron Bok, thank you. I support the relevant legislative amendments detailed in the papers. We need to fast-track the development of the Northern Metropolis, and we also need to take bolder steps to pilot different projects inside the Northern Metropolis. That is why I agree with the Secretary. It doesn't mean that we no longer supervise the projects within the NM. It doesn't mean we give any tip-off either. Our colleagues have been endeavoring to make sure that all procedures are lawful. In paragraph 9, in accordance with Cap 123, the Buildings Department can handle the situation in Tuen Mun. On top of private projects in the Northern Metropolis, with these projects being subject to 123, there are other government departments as well, such as the highways, the ASD, the WSD, and so on. Is it possible to allow such directors of departments to enjoy the same statutory power to grant exemptions? Those under categories 1, 2, and 3 will have to follow the instructions and rules inside these categories. Thank you. Next, in paragraph 12, for certain construction machinery, they will not be subject to regulation. In the Northern Metropolis, construction projects may use the use the machinery for a shorter period of time. It takes a long time to make these changes. Is it possible to allow the introduction of these pieces of construction machinery into Hong Kong subject to the fulfillment of certain criteria? Thank you, Secretary. Public works projects are government projects, and they are not governed by the Buildings Ordinance. There are exemptions granted to this type of government works. The heads of different grades should take bolder steps. They need to greenlight the use of good machinery. We aim to surpass the Buildings Ordinance. We aim to move beyond it. The introduction and adoption of innovative technologies in construction materials does not require power conferred by an ordinance. They can already do so administratively. The Public Works section has been promoting this rigorously. But do we need to remind them black and white I don't think so. I believe they have been equipped with such awareness, but I will return to check with my colleagues. Regarding cross-boundary factors of production, we have already made it clear that we will use the national recognized standards. Regarding private works and government works, probably they require new innovative technologies. And this is true in the sense that we do not only aim at national standards. Standards in use in any jurisdiction may also apply. We want to cover cross-boundary because we believe we can make it clear, as after all, people will know that we will use national standards. In other projects, however, the existing legislation can cover such situations.
Mr. Michael Lee. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the development of the Northern Metropolis, everyone in Hong Kong wants to expedite the progress. Of course, we want to have a clearer area boundary for the Northern Metropolis. So in drawing that boundary, have you narrowed it down to the minute details? Is there flexibility to expand the boundary of the NM under the legislation? So concerning streamlining the town planning workflow, now you have adopted a two-pronged approach. Concerning conservation areas, the original mechanism stands, that is, applications still have to go through technical assessment. For the other areas, other than the conservation areas, there will be a streamlined approach. But that doesn't mean that there will be no control. There are still procedures to fulfill. Now, in terms of gatekeeping, is there an appeal mechanism when green zones are involved? Would there be a mechanism to appeal the cases to relax the applicable scope? Now, concerning compensation arrangements, many a times the difficulty lies in disagreement with the principal tenant. Very often they will not agree to the amount of compensation, so can you do anything to expedite the progress? Secretary, I will defer the last question to the Lands Department. On the first question, how do we define the area boundaries for Northern Metropolis under the principal ordinance? The broad definition is the area boundaries of the Yuen Long District and North District. On the other hand, there are many outline zoning plans. With a majority of the plan belonging to Yuen Long and North District, but there may be a tiny portion on the OZP protruding to Tuen Mun or Tai Po District. So we would still consider these OZPs within the boundary of the Northern Metropolis, but that's not the case. On the contrary, if there is an OZP with a majority of area belonging to Tai Po with a little portion belonging to the Northern Metropolis, then we would carve that little portion away from the Northern Metropolis boundary. So for these carved away sites, most of them are not developable land. Many of them are hilly areas, so it would not affect the development of the Northern Metropolis. On streamlining town planning procedures, true, we don't intend to extend the applicable scope to conservation areas. Now, if the statutory land use is green belt, then it is also a conservation area. The explanation for green belt has not changed. Green belt is also a conservation area. To avoid dispute, if the site in an application straddles upon the green belt, then this streamlined approach does not apply. However, the applicant can still make the application for modification of the OZPs under the existing town planning procedures. We have not deprived the applicants the right to develop the land. Lands Department. Thank you. Ms. Lily Chu. Concerning the compensation made by the principal tenants, that's also a statutory compensation application. So we have already received such applications. Administrative arrangements have been put in place to assist the applicants. For example, encouraging the applicants to engage professionals to communicate with us. And also we have engaged professionals ourselves to communicate the assessment standards directly to the principal tenants or the applicants, and also to share with them successful cases. So through face-to-face meeting, many cases have reached an agreed compensation. So we will continue to handle these claims with the expeditious arrangement. Ms. Lin Shik, thank you. Some members have asked questions about the exemption of construction machineries approved by the national recognized standards for the transport infrastructure projects in Hong Shui and Northern Link. Now, my question is in relation to occupational safety and health. So will those machineries be operated by certified workers from the mainland, or will our local workers operate them? Now, the training and safety standards may be different. Only one question in relation to the operation of those machineries. Mr. Eddie Lee, thank you. The principle is to deliver the construction project smoothly without the need to use different personnel or machineries. Now we will formulate further measures to streamline the procedures. However, in terms of environmental standards as well as safety, we will uphold the standard stringently. Next, Mr. Ben Chen. Thank you, Chairman. I fully support the introduction of the dedicated legislation for the Northern Metropolis. We need to remove the barriers, especially in Area 2 streamlining town planning procedures. In the procedures, there's much room for streamlining. Many lands will be resumed when developing the Northern Metropolis. Some operations will have to be relocated, and some applications will be made to the Town Planning Board for rezoning. A large number of cases will be created, and the workload for the lands departments will be very heavy. Now, some former owners have encountered difficulties. They've already received an approval from the Town Planning Board, but it takes a long time to assess the value of the land. Now, land is a key productive factor. If the development process is put on hold because of failure to reach an agreed compensation level, then that's not ideal. So concerning assessing the value of the land, will the government engage qualified surveyors to compile the reports for the government, stating that according to their professional knowledge, what the compensation level should be? Then the government would review these compensations on a random basis. Problematic cases would be reviewed after compensation is disbursed. If not, then the lands department's workload will be greatly alleviated. So I know the government has done a lot of work, including setting a standard rate for compensation. But in terms of streamlining the workflow further, we should harness the power of the private sector. Now on Area 4, using innovative construction methods. Now some technologies are regulated by the Buildings Ordinance as well. For example, smart car park built in modules. Now if these structures can also be included under the streamlined approach, then to build a car park in the Northern Metropolis, we don't have to submit an application anew. That would encourage the appetite of the investors and also enhance the speed to approve the construction of smart car parks. In the past, it took 5 to 6 years before an approval is given. So can we extend the definition of buildings to similar structures and facilities so that they can be developed quickly in the Northern Metropolis? Secretary, 2 suggestions and 2 questions. On the first one, concerning finding outside help to assess the statutory compensation for land resumption, we can consider that. Now, however, if you are suggesting that the lands department only conducts a random inspection on behalf of the government, that's not ideal because public money is involved. If you're suggesting that initial assessments be conducted by the professionals in the private sector and help the lands department to lighten their workload, we can consider that. Concerning streamlining the process, now for land resumption, we need to make compensation. Now for temporary structures, the applicants may be applying for an exemption rather than a land lease modification. So can we introduce a standard rate for exemption fee? Well, we can consider that. On whether smart car park is included under the criteria of innovative construction technology, I will defer the question to the Director of Building. On smart car park, on many occasions, the applicants have been equipping the car park with smart technologies. So it's the EMSD, which is the approval authority for these applications. Now, since we are dealing with these applications on a centralized approach, can we deal with these applications together with other applications including fire services installations, where we will have to work with the other departments.
Can I add something real quick? Thank you. These smart car parks need to get approvals by the EMSD as well as the buildings department. If we can streamline the procedures, probably we can greatly enhance efficiency. Actually, a lot of the construction plans are quite similar. Can we approve similar plans in one go? Secretary, well, it's all about liaison and coordination among departments. We do not necessarily have to handle this under the dedicated legislation regarding the Northern Metropolis. Thank you. Ms. Kwok Foo-yong, I agree with the dedicated legislation to speed up the development of the NM. We need to drive the development of industries in order to tie in with our high quality development of the country. I understand that the government has removed a lot of red tape, and this shows the resolve of the administration. I have some questions for the Secretary. One regarding the adoption of innovative new construction technologies. A lot of members have expressed concerns. The administration said that they would incorporate quality, sustainability, and functionality into exemption criteria, but these are hard to be measured in our dedicated legislation or technical memoranda. Will you add more quantifiable and tangible indicators such as energy efficiency levels or labels, as well as carbon emissions, so that there are clear and more concrete standards or indicators to follow? Regarding the Sandy Ridge Data Park, it's faring quite well. Just within 2 years, things could be completed from the feasibility study to the awarding of tender. The whole process takes a very long time. So I'd like to know, with the risks being manageable and with us making good use of institutional innovation, is it possible for us to apply this concept in the construction projects in the Northern Metropolis? If yes, which projects can we reference? Thank you. Secretary, regarding innovative construction technologies, Ms. Kwok is correct. When there are sustainable, functional, innovative designs, we empower the Director of Buildings to grant approval. We do not need to ask the applicant to prove why the previous technology shouldn't be used. If we continue to add even more objective criteria, that is a certain level that you have to attain when it comes to innovative construction materials, I'm afraid we cannot make it happen. That is because technology is developed by leaps and by bounds. We cannot undermine the flexibility given to the Director of Buildings. Instead, if there are good construction materials, designs, technologies, once approved, these will be uploaded for the information of the industry. The industry will have such information. They can reference these approved methods. This is the way forward for us. Just now, member referred to the Sandy Ridge Data Park. This is the result of the concerted efforts of different departments. They put their heads together to make it happen. In the Northern Metropolis, there are public rental housing projects, there are private projects, there are public works projects, and so on. We have already set up dedicated task forces and offices. Our colleagues will have to consult dedicated offices and task groups. Projects will be elevated to these offices for the steer of the permanent secretary. We will speed up the procedures. Thank you. Ms. Julia Lau. Thank you, Chairman. I support the dedicated legislation, but I have 2 points to make. I'd like to ask the Lands Department regarding cultural and tourism facilities. Will you consider charging on a short-term tenancy basis in order to enhance efficiency and effectiveness? Regarding the demarcation of the Northern Metropolis, I'd like to ask about such policies based on our experience regarding the development of the new territories. Land resumption moved at a snail's pace, which affected the pace of development overall. On behalf of the Institute of Surveyors, I'd like to ask the administration about land boundaries. Under the existing land registration system, every land transaction concerns ownership transfer, and one will have to refer to the relevant sketches or plans. If the information doesn't tally, then professionals have to be sought in order to check or verify the boundaries of lands. In these situations, the buyer of land are not protected. For Crown land, 120 years ago, the units were different. The units adopted in the past were different from those adopted at present. This gives rise to uncertainty and unclear units. In the Kutong area, when it comes to land resumption, the information shared by the administration and that of the landowners doesn't tally. In the end, there were disputes and the cases were brought to the court. Regarding the size of land, I would like to give you an example. Within the government, the information of the size of land is actually 0. 0.1 hectare equals 432.6 square feet. In short, the units used were different. How can you standardize the units? You need to invoke Cap 473. You also need to verify and check in accordance with the law. And the government can actually set up a land boundaries tribunal to adjudicate on these matters. The advantages are to speed up the pace of land resumption. This is especially true when it comes to the development of the Northern Metropolis. We can also dovetail with the rule of big data as advocated by our country. Right, so here comes my question. How will the Northern Metropolis handle questions or issues in relation to the dedicated legislation? Well, Secretary, you have to be very brief. As I understand, the members would like to have a better system to handle disputes concerning land boundaries. Honestly, we are not going to handle these with dedicated legislation as it concerns land titles. And if we do it this way, we will not move on as fast. The progress will be retarded. Land boundaries have to do with land titles. Probably we can discuss this with members on the next occasion regarding whether the Lands Department can make use of standardized rates. These are administrative measures, and we do not need to handle this with dedicated legislation. There's a dedicated task force. We are exploring different streamlining measures. And we will also cover this within our purview. Thank you. Professor Priscilla Leung, thank you. Director Jia Baolong visited the Northern Metropolis just recently. The Northern Metropolis is key to the GBA. Law must receive first priority. As I read from reports, our national leaders speak very highly of the work of the government. That is why I fully support dedicated legislation to speed up the development of the NM. If you do not remove red tape, it's difficult for us to realize our goal. It's as large as 1/3 of Hong Kong. I hope that we will see the bill in July. As I remember at the last meeting, for the remaining 5 parts, subsidiary legislation will be announced at the same time. Sufficient time will also be given to members for the scrutiny of such legislation. I'd like to follow up on NM development. I'd like to ask about the Guangdong province. In the Chinese mainland, as members mentioned, we have factors of production such as personnel, data, materials, and capital. All these are interconnected. It's all about connection and interfacing of systems and rules. Just now, the Secretary mentioned that you have agreements with the Guangdong side in relation to innovative construction materials. When it comes to interfacing, are you going to take it step by step? That is personnel, data, materials, and capital. My next question is actually my suggestion at the same time regarding the Hon Judy Tianhai Railway. We have a target completion date, but as I mentioned to the Secretary, we visited Tianhai and they are anxious to see this happen soon. In other words, we need to speed up this project. We have the co-location arrangements. I agree that we shouldn't grant exemptions in all sub-areas. We need to comply with the overall direction. I explained to members of the public as well as stakeholders during the co-location arrangements commissioning. Owners had to withstand noise and so on, and now they are still going to have years to withstand even more noise. We need to mitigate the impact on residents. That is not my question, but that is my view. So I'd like to ask about interfacing. Thank you. Secretary, regarding our communication with the Guangdong province, I can say that we have had well-rounded discussions. The Deputy Financial Secretary has been liaising with the officials in the Guangdong province, as well as the Shenzhen municipality. Different government units sit together. At the meetings, they discuss boundary control points, cross-boundary flow, transportation, cooperation of I&T parks. At just our recent meeting, we introduced this dedicated legislation. It's important to keep both sides updated on what we are doing. We have a dedicated task group, and in this dedicated task group, we report on what we are doing, so we do not worry about our discussions at all. Instead, the more frequent, the better.
Members, the discussion of this item has come to a close. Do members agree with the legislative proposal? It is agreed. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, promoting urban-rural integration in the Northern Metropolis, establishing the Northern Metropolis Urban-rural Integration Fund as a pilot scheme. We will now invite the government officials for this item to come in. I remind members, this item involves a funding proposal. According to Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure, if members have direct or indirect pecuniary interest concerning the matter, you should disclose the nature of such interest before you speak. Members who would like to speak, you may now press the button. I will first invite the Secretary to give us a briefing. Thank you, Chairman and members. I am of the view that the arrangements of today's agenda is a testimony to urban-rural integration. The previous item was about development, while this item is about highlighting the characteristic of the rural areas in the Northern Metropolis. That's why we said in developing the Northern Metropolis, we don't want to develop it as a concrete jungle. The village environment is also important. So we will strive to establish the Urban-Rural Integration Fund within the year. Having listened to members' views, we will translate the strategies into the guidelines for urban-rural integration. And by the fourth quarter this year, we will seek funding approval in the amount of $200 million with the Finance Committee to establish the Northern Metropolis Urban-Rural Integration Fund. We are seeking members' views on these two proposals today. Now, I will invite the Director of the Northern Metropolis Coordination Office to walk us through the measures in the briefest words. We will talk about the measures directly. Ms. So. Chairman. There are some technical issues. Allow me to give the briefing first. Now, briefly speaking, like the Secretary has said, we have been taking forward measures in relation to urban-rural integration. But it is our opinion that we can take a step further. So first of all, we will launch a series of measures as shown on the slide. And also we will launch a guide for urban-rural integration to institutionalize these directions. These directions should be followed when developing new development areas. The first measure is revitalizing signature rural buildings and establishing heritage trails in villages. In developing the Northern Metropolis, we will leverage the rich cultural resources in villages to realize the concept of urban-rural integration. We will revitalize characteristic village buildings and establish heritage trails in villages and link up heritage trails with traditional architecture, with scenic spots in villages to promote rural tourism. We will proactively explore the feasibility of establishing rural heritage trails in the vicinity of the NDAs under planning. Now, for some reasons, opportunities, there is the Santine Heritage Trails. Now, we are now taking forward the construction works in Santine-Tenopole. There are villages nearby and also other heritage buildings for establishing heritage trail. The second measure is to reserve space for open spaces and organizing traditional festive events while developing NDAs. We will reserve sufficient public space in the buffer zones between villages and the NDAs and also convert existing spaces into open space. Now, these open spaces will be used for leisurely or recreational purpose, as well as hosting specialty markets or traditional festive events, for example, Ta Chiu, Dragon and Lion dances, and Yulan festivals. So in developing NDAs, we will select pilot spots for this measure. For example, Chao Tao Chun and Hawan Chun in Santine-Tenopole, the space underneath Fanling Bypass, Tonghang Chun section, and also the Tunglei Villa near Ching Shun Wai in Hongshui Q. They are very suitable for development into open spaces. The third measure is to improve the rural infrastructures while developing the NDAs, especially sewage. Now, in taking forward NDA projects, we will take the opportunity to upgrade the infrastructure in the rural areas. So besides NDAs, we will also upgrade the infrastructure in nearby villages in terms of road and transport networks, as well as drainage and sewage systems which are close to villages' heart. In terms of drainage, the CEDD will monitor the performance of the drainage systems and implement measures to prevent flooding in rural areas. We will adopt the sponge city concept in enhancing drainage capacity and improving drainage systems in NDAs to reduce flooding risk and enhance the drainage capacity. Now, on sewage, all along when we are developing public sewage systems in NDAs, when there are villages nearby, we would position the public sewage system closer to the villages to reserve flexibility to connect the rural drainage system to the public drainage network. So we think this measure is very effective. To take it one step further, not only would we select locations closer to villages when building public sewage systems, when we conduct site formation for infrastructure projects, we will reserve funding in the funding proposal for connection of the public sewage system to existing villages. So we are not just establishing a hub for collecting sewage, but rather we are directly connecting the sewage system to the rural villages. Now, to prioritize the use of resources, we will focus on projects with public sewage system. Now, so far, some 40 or 50 existing villages will be accorded priority. That is reserving funding in our funding proposal to connect the rural villages to the public sewage system. So these pilot sites include Hon Judy CHAN and Sentin Tenopol and the surrounding villages, as mentioned in the paper. The fourth direction is to allow conversion of the whole block of new territories exempted houses or small houses in pilot areas into restaurants, retail shops, or guest houses. Now, at present, only the ground floor of small houses can be used as retail shops or restaurants. In other words, these operations are not allowed on the first, second, and third floors unless an application is made to the TPP. And also, to operate a guest house in small houses, application has to be made to the TPP. Now, to truly achieve the concepts of urban-rural integration, we need to take it one step further. That is, streamlining the planning procedures to allow wholesale conversion of small houses, rather than just the ground floor, into retail shops, restaurants, and guest houses. These will be always permitted uses, i.e. column 1 uses. No town planning board approval is needed. Now, we have selected 2 trial locations, including Yin Kong and Ho-Xiang-Hyung, which has a rather sophisticated infrastructure network nearby. These 2 sites have great potential. So we will amend the OZPs in the future so that no applications are needed for the above operations. Now, for those applicants who can't wait, they can still make an application to the TPP in the interim. Another measure, besides streamlining the planning procedures, is to facilitate the approval for fire services requirements. Now, for restaurants located on the second or third floor, there are a lot of fire services requirements, as well as other FEHD requirements. So now we are working with the FSD as well as the FEHD to come up with a simplified and streamlined and practicable model for small houses to operate as guest houses and restaurants, having fulfilled certain conditions. Now, we hope that the guidelines will be made available soon, together with the guidelines on urban-rural integration to be released later this year. The fifth direction is leveraging farmland for farming activities. There is a lot of potential for farmland in the Northern Metropolis. There are a lot of government-led projects, for example, Long Valley Nature Park and Sanpushi Wetland Conservation Park. Some sites are granted to farmers for farming practices. Now, the $200 million NM Urban-Rural Integration Fund will synergize with our efforts to leverage farmland. And we will enhance the agricultural and fishery practices in Sanbushu Wetland Park, and there will be synergy with the tourism sector as well.
最後呢一個呢，就係我。
And next, turning to the NM Urban-rural Integration Fund. As mentioned, a lot of measures will be launched by the government. However, at the same time, we want to tap into community wisdom. That's why, under the budget, it's been announced that we would set up an NM Urban-rural Integration Fund of $200 million. We want to launch this pilot scheme to fund different schemes. We want to cover rural areas located just adjacent to NDAs in the NM not discovered yet. I mean, not covered by the current countryside conservation funding scheme yet. For these rural areas is about a dozen or so villages. Regarding the application requirements, definitely the applications will have to align with the principle of urban-rural integration. It also needs to promote rural tourism. It needs to benefit the entire community instead of individuals or single organizations. Regarding application criteria, charitable organizations or company limited by guarantee registered under the company's ordinance, whose objects and powers do not include the distribution of profits to its members. In other words, it needs to be a not-profit-making institution or a non-profit-making society or organization registered or set up under other laws. Taking this as an example, rural committees satisfying criteria A, B, or C above will also be eligible to apply. Applicants need to fulfill either one of the three application criteria, but they can also apply in partnership with business organizations or an organization satisfying criteria A, B, or C. Regarding what projects are being funded and the subsidy cap, we mainly want to provide subsidies for restoration or conversion of private land and/or buildings, such as village houses, ancestral halls owned by Chotong lands, private schools in villages. We also want to utilize the above for implementing financially sustainable projects of cultural, historical, tourism value. We don't want these to be just fleeting projects. We want them to be sustainable. For them to be sustainable, we allow them to be revenue generating, such as cafes, which generate revenue. These are permissible. We cover hardware upgrades as well as initial operating expenses. In this connection, our pilot scheme will also cover this. The subsidy cap is suggested to be set at $10 million. We want to see projects of a larger scale or projects with more highlights. This is one of the examples. Probably members of the public or the community can add elements to some hiking trails or cultural trails, heritage trails in Hong Kong. Then we can turn them into heritage galleries, souvenir shops, theme catering areas. These will be more appealing to members of the public. This is what we want to achieve with the fund. We aim at receiving such applications. In addition to the cap of $10 million, of course, we want to fund more projects. We want more projects to benefit. However, these projects should not be those about restoration or conversion of private land and or buildings, such as village branding design. The subsidy cap is set at about $2 million, a little lower. The Development Bureau will set up an assessment committee chaired by our permanent secretary. There will also be representatives from other bureaus and departments. We will also enlist the participation of members of the public. We will invite proposals to make sure that their applications are in line with our own goal. We will also assess the technical feasibility of the projects. The pilot scheme will be open for application by batches. We will handle the applications batch by batch. It is often said that applications for government projects are complicated. That's why we will organize a briefing session. We will also provide technical support for projects that have been approved. We will provide relevant guidance and support. There will be a series of mechanisms, including a supervision mechanism. We will enter into funding agreements with the applicant. They will have to take forward the projects in accordance with the signed agreement. Annual reports will also have to be submitted to the panel in order to enhance the transparency of the scheme. Regarding the implementation timetable, in the fourth quarter this year, we will apply to the Finance Committee of the Council for the funding, and we will roll out the proposed pilot scheme subject to the funding approval of the FC, and we will also publish the guidelines on urban-rural integration in the NM. Thank you. Members, we only have 2 to 3 minutes until we wrap up this discussion item. I suggest extending the meeting by 30 minutes. A total of 30 members have pressed the button to request to speak. They are Mr. Tam Chen Kwok, Mr. Lam Chen Sing, Mr. Aaron Bok, Mr. Mark Chong, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Ms. Michelle Tang, Mr. Liu Ming, Ms. Julia Lau, Mr. Augustin Wong, Ms. Christine Fong, Mr. Hon Chow, and myself. 3 minutes each. I remind members, if members have not yet asked questions within 2 minutes, I will ask the administration to answer very succinctly. Thank you. Mr. Tam, thank you. I thank the administration for adopting my suggestions, including different relaxation and allowing the conversion of facilities. Infrastructure has also been improved. The pilot scheme also allows members of the public to take part in the scheme, and they can share the fruits. Regarding the pilot scheme of Urban-rural Integration Fund, applications will need to meet some criteria, or they need to be in partnership with non-profit-making organizations. I'd like to know if the administration has considered the fact that these criteria will make it difficult for applicants to succeed. Actually, a lot of applicants are very passionate about promoting Hong Kong culture. They want to pass down such culture to the next generations. The document also referred to the setup of assessment committee. I believe the administration understands that it's difficult to get unanimous support by the whole panel, so I'd like to know how the administration will strike a balance when it comes to the views and opinions of different members on the assessment committee. Thank you. Well, actually, villagers know very well these procedures. However, they may not have business acumen. Indeed, we want to make good use of these funds. Applicants need to have good business sense. That is why we allow applicants to work in conjunction with business organizations. You will have to work with a non-profit making institution. At the same time, if villagers would like to do this, at least they need to have a plan in mind. Then we may give them views, advice. If we know that somebody else is interested in working on something along the same line, we may be a matchmaker, so to speak. We will connect different parties. Regarding unanimous support, this is not a requirement carved in stone. We adopt an approach of common sense. We do not require 100% of support across the entire panel. And we will definitely strike a balance in this regard. Thank you. Mr. Lam Chen Sing, followed by Mr. Aaron Bok. After Mr. Bok speaks, I will draw a line. Thank you. Mr. Lam? Regarding the fund in question, of course, this is a good project. You can subsidize different groups to promote rural tourism. Projects will have to operate for at least 3 years, but I hope that these projects will go beyond 3 years. At the time of approval, is it possible to ensure sustainability of their projects? We don't want groups just to make an application to subsidize their operation. We want these schemes to operate for a longer period of time. In the past, the Labor and Welfare Bureau subvented some social enterprises by providing some funds rather. However, some social enterprises actually cease operation after only 3 years. We aim at sustainable operation, so I'd like to know if the administration will attach more weight to sustainability. Thank you. Secretary. When the government uses public funds to provide funding under a scheme, of course, we want the projects to be sustainable. But let's not forget, when applicants come to us, for instance, when they want to renovate an ancestral hall or a village house, these are private properties. If they get subsidies and if they give up halfway through, then we will resume the land. We will take it back. Well, it's different from a case in which the land is actually a government land. We cannot take back private land just as we wish. So what if an organization exits before the promised timeline? We may mete out penalties, or we may ask the subsidized organization to give us back the funding. This is different from government land, in which case we can take back the government land. We cannot take back private land. We do not have any across-the-board timeline. We need to decide on different timelines depending on different projects.
Mr. Aaron Bok. Thank you, Chairman. I declare interest. I'm the director of a one-man consultancy firm and the non-executive director of 2 companies. Now, paragraph 14 concerning improving rural infrastructure and sewage system. So it's mainly about sewage collection system and drainage system. Can we extend the scope to improvement of road conditions. Many road surfaces are in poor condition in the new territories. I'm a cyclist myself. There are a lot of potholes, and the local district offices lack the fund to repair them. So can you support the villagers to improve the road conditions? Another question, paragraph 22, concerning developments of ecotourism in Lavao Shan, Chin Pei Choi, and Pak Nai areas. Can we extend that to cycling tourism as well? I'm not saying we should build cycling paths, cycling tracks, but rather we should improve the road conditions and connect up the roads so that cyclists can cycle all the way in new territories. Again, I'm not saying we should build cycling tracks. Secretary, concerning improvement of rural roads, the same principle applies. That is, whether we can take the opportunities in developing new development areas and improve the road conditions nearby. So that has to do with allocation of resources. Where we can, we will do it. But the premises are that these roads must be near the new development areas. There is the question of priority. The same principle applies to sewage. When we are developing public sewage system, we may take the opportunity to connect them with rural sewage systems. After the launch of the Urban-rural Integration Fund, if villagers apply for funding to repair their ancestral halls or their village houses, they may also need to improve the road network as well. So this may be part of the funding proposal. And the government will also identify opportunity where we can intervene. Concerning ecotourism, there are existing roads where cyclists may cycle. Can we improve the road conditions of those roads? Now, those are minor works projects in rural areas. Under the Home Affairs Bureau, there is a countryside minor works funding scheme. Mr. Mak Chong. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to clarify about the use of the $200 million of the Urban-rural Integration Fund. So it does not cover the scope of other measures mentioned in the paper. I don't think $200 million would be sufficient for improving the rural infrastructure. Now, I had a lot of opinions for the government in neglecting the rural areas. Now, we are spending billions of dollars in developing the new development areas. However, for the existing villages, there are 100 villages in Sapahang and other rural areas. They are still using septic tanks. So in paragraph 6 of the paper, you have mentioned improving the sewage and other rural infrastructure in rural areas. So you have my thanks for that. But how much will you spend on this policy? Is there a timetable? And are you taking away resources from the larger pot? Now, you haven't mentioned the enhancements to rural internet networks or telecommunication networks. Now, the signal is poor in rural areas and the internet connection is slow. Now, to turn rural cultural resources into tourism attraction, internet coverage is very important. Now, very often, visitors would rely on Wi-Fi connections. So optic fiber network is important. So can you add one more measure in your policy, that is to enhance the coverage and quality of telecommunication network in rural areas? Secretary, I will defer the last question to the Director of the NM office concerning whether the Urban-rural Integration Fund covers the objectives in paragraph 6. Now it says reserving space for open spaces for festive events. So this is definitely part of our public works project. In terms of sewage and rural infrastructure improvements, again, that's also public works projects, so the integration fund will not be invoked. Still in paragraph 6, revitalizing signature rural buildings and heritage trails, and also leveraging farmland for farming activities. Now, private applicants can apply for the funding to revitalize their land. So the fund may be invoked. So in short, the fund will apply for private projects. For sewage and other public works projects, we will use the Capital Works Reserve Fund. Now, the paper says we have identified some 40 to 50 villages with potential for sewage improvement. In terms of the batching arrangements as well as the timetable, we still need to finalize it. In the application for funding, we will include them in the funding proposal for development of new development areas, but we are still working on the timetable and priority. Director, in terms of internet coverage, we haven't forgotten about this. We have 5G and optic fiber. Now we have 99% 5G network coverage in Hong Kong already, but we still have a subsidy scheme for expansion of 5G network to subsidize operators to add 5G base stations in remote places. So far, some 50 base stations have been planned. In terms of optic fiber base stations, we have also launched a funding scheme to expand the optic fiber network to 235 villages. 233 of them have completed installation of optic fiber. We will continue to subsidize operators to expand their fiber optic network. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Deputy Chairman. I declare interest. I am the Chairman of the Hung Kok. The Rural Committee may apply for the fund. And concerning the concept of urban-rural integration and also the establishment of the $200 million integration fund, the Hung Kok supports it. Now, we cannot neglect the actual needs of villages while developing new development areas. That's the same case for all countries in the world. We should not neglect villages and rural areas. We need to uphold the promise of balancing development and conservation. Now, a question about the paper concerning reserving space to organize festive activities. Now, paragraph 11, it says buffer zones as well as spaces underneath flyovers will be used to host heritage activities and festivities. Now, the Taiping Qingzhou Festival is a once-in-a-decade festival. It needs a large site to take place, so spaces underneath flyovers may not be sufficient. Rural activities will usually involve more than 100 participants, So have you consulted the operational needs of the rural villages to ensure that there is sufficient space for large-scale festivities? Secretary, concerning reservation of spaces for festive activities, we will reserve spaces during the planning stage, and the Works Department will provide these spaces. Now, Mr. Lau's question is very realistic. Who will manage the space? Now, according to my experience, if rural committees are willing to manage the open space, then we can lease the site to rural committees under short-term tenancies. If rural committees prefer to let the government manage the sites, then they will not have the prioritized use of the site. So we have no plan yet concerning which approach to take, but we will definitely sort it out with the local stakeholders. Next, Mr. Yu Ming. My apologies should be Ms. Michelle Tang. Thank you, Chairman. Mine are mostly suggestions. Now, the $200 million Integration Fund will support private bodies and NGOs to promote revitalization, rural tourism, and cultural and heritage conservation. I endorse this. I support this direction. This is part of developing the Northern Metropolis soft power. And with government support in building hardware, it will help villages to stand its own ground and become a participant of the development. Now, there are some insufficiencies. There is a soft cap of $2 million for activity and $10 million for hardware upgrading. Now, compared with the massive investment in the Northern Metropolis, it is just a drop in the bucket. Now, the fund favors larger villages with more influences, then remote villages may be marginalized, and the urban-rural integration may be unfair. Now, there are also issues concerning reception capacity, and some projects may be short-lived. So I like the idea of self-financing model. And we can make reference to places like Japan and Taiwan. That can be a one-stop model from guest houses to restaurant to tourism. Now, we should establish a guideline for streamlined application of restaurant license in the Northern Metropolis. So there should also be training programs for the villagers. There should also be matching mechanism with the tourism sector. Other members have mentioned that we need to ensure that the infrastructure, for example, sewage, fire services, installation, and supporting facilities for visitors must be in place to avoid an adverse impact on the local livelihood. Now, if the integration fund is implemented smoothly, it will become a demonstration case for urban-rural integration. Otherwise, it will just become an empty fund. So I hope the government will continue to listen to views from the industry and the local stakeholders so that we can have innovative sites in the Northern Metropolis as well as sites with cultural atmosphere. Secretary, we fully understand that the $200 million are just a start for kickstarting urban-rural integration in Northern Metropolis. Now, by using the fund appropriately, we can secure support from the community for us to take forward our work. Now, for really remote villages, the EEB has a countryside conservation fund. So that fund will be more applicable to those villages.
Next, Mr. Liu Ming. Thank you. I believe members support the NM Urban-rural Integration Fund as a pilot scheme. We need to continue to pursue development. An application may cut across multiple bureaus, such as Chotong's, as well as other venues. These may involve the FSD or the FEHD. So I'd like to know if any department will be a coordinator in order to take forward these projects successfully. Does the government have any dedicated task force? Does it provide any coordinator in order to expedite the approval of applications? We need to make it happen as soon as possible. In the countryside, there might be different rights of road. Will we seize this opportunity for the government to get the right of way? We need to make it convenient for the government to manage different roads. Otherwise, it might be difficult for the government to carry out repairs. Thank you. Secretary, regarding how we provide technical support, I'd like to answer in two aspects. One, overall, after we have selected some pilot rural development areas, the planning department will proactively amend the plan. They will remove red tape. The other point is that when you want to turn village houses into eateries and guest houses, we will work together with other departments to issue guidelines. I do understand after individual applications are made, they still need technical support. A few years ago, the government set up a 1.5 billion funds to subsidize NGOs to use government land. Of course, they welcome financial support, but they also considered technical support very targeted and helpful. I thank my colleagues for taking more steps to provide technical support. They want to see implementation of projects, and I believe we can do so with the pilot scheme as well. Regarding private road sections, when there are future repairs, we will seize the opportunities of the development of NDAs to resume these roads with the land resumption ordinance. I believe we need to consider different applications or cases case by case. We welcome members in view. Thank you. Next, Ms. Julia Lau. I have 3 points to make. Thank you, Chairman. From what I understand, a university published a book on how to manage the new territories. I was taken aback as the university seems to be acting the role of the government, and I believe that the government needs to attach importance to this. Applications by rural committees are accepted. However, I'd like to add the point that they have different terms of office, so they are changing terms quite often. When the village head is replaced by a new one, probably the whole agreement might be overturned. So I'd like to ask the administration, will you require the applicant to obtain approval at Hon Judy before you will accept their applications? This will ensure a formal authorization of the village community, so there will be a future mechanism to handle such situations where they make a U-turn. Regarding the design of public spaces, we can model the design of public spaces such as some venues. They organize competitions and they have world-famous architects. They lead young people to take part together. So 3 points. Thank you, Secretary. As I understand, indeed, universities can submit applications. If villagers want to seek the help from universities, universities do have the expertise to provide assistance. Regarding village heads, that is the composition of rural committee. Of course, we understand there's a fixed tenure. However, when they make applications, they do not make an application just under their name. They make applications under a certain unit. In other words, they make an application on behalf of their organization. In the process, we widely consider the views of the Hon Judy, for instance. But does the Hon Judy have the final say in vetoing the project or supporting the project? In the assessment committee, we have non-government representatives, and I believe there will be members who are well up in the rural community joining us. If there are public spaces for villagers to celebrate festive occasions, we definitely heed the views of villagers. Rural committees in Tai O let us know how they want to turn their public spaces and what cultural elements they want to add to their venues. We are very much happy to listen to them. I'd like to follow up, Chairman. I believe there is room for improvement when it comes to cultural elements in relation to architecture. It's very functional. We're nearing the end of the extended time, and I suggest further extending the meeting by 15 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Augustine Wong. Thank you. The concept of rural urban integration is a very good one. It's worth our support. When the government implements this policy, I hope that the government will liaise more with stakeholders, as details will make or break the implementation of the scheme. When it comes to sewerage, when there are channels, when they connect to village houses, the owners of the village houses may not be able to finish the project, and I believe that the government needs to resume private land to make this happen. I hope that the government will consider this. Otherwise, you will not be able to connect the sewerage system. Well, when it comes to the introduction of modern agriculture technologies, I'd like to ask about that. It's good to leverage farmland for farming activities, but how are you going to manage operation? Are you going to rent out the project or the area? Regarding the first question, we take note of the view of the member. Regarding Shampoo Shu Wetland Conservation Park, the EEB is going to provide a detailed plan in relation to the management as well as expectations. The EEB will give an account to the Council in due course. Thank you, Ms. Christine Fong. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the development of urban-rural integration in the Northern Metropolis, village houses receive funds to rezone some inclusive facilities. The East and North NT or Tong Chong or Tai O, I believe we can take a multi-pronged approach. We can implement this in the Northern Metropolis, but we can also implement this project in the surrounding areas of the Northern Metropolis. In Baiyun area in Guangzhou or the Old Town area in Zhongshan, well, they can see that this can be implemented in the area, and this is Jiao Festival, different kinds of dances, of Kirin dances. These are good cultural elements. When it comes to village sewage programs, I can see that the government provides a lot of support. So I'd like to ask, say if 50 villages in the North District or Yuen Long have been identified, will you consider other villages adjacent to the Northern Metropolis? Can you give us concrete examples, say on the environs of Fanling? There is a venue or a hall called Song Him Tong. Are you going to include it? This is one of the examples. This is a one-off grant. The cap is $10 million, and of course I hope that there will be larger projects. But to other communities, they would think that the budget is not a small one. I hope that the Development Bureau can take forward the projects and adopt a multi-pronged approach. Thank you. Secretary, member referred to our subsidy of $200 million to promote urban-rural integration in the Northern Metropolis. Of course, I need to admit that other areas also warrant such integration, but I'd like to say that it's a matter of resources when it comes to focusing our efforts on the Northern Metropolis first. Indeed, the current term government focuses on the development of the Northern Metropolis. We have limited capability in this regard, and we have pulled our resources into the Northern Metropolis. If we can excel in the Northern Metropolis in this regard, we do not rule out the possibility of implementing the same in other villages outside the Northern Metropolis. but it's not within our plan at present. But we take note of the expectations of members regarding sewerage. For connecting pipes, the DSD and the EEB do have this plan that cover all the villages across the city as a matter of priority and order. For the villages inside the Northern Metropolis, they do not need to join that line. If they are near the new development area, they are singled out and they can be given priority. But it doesn't mean other villages will lose out on such opportunities. That is because we have the village sewage program. It's just a matter of order and priority.
Next, Mr. Hon Chow. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the government for taking on board our critical suggestion. Earlier this year, Mr. Yu Ming and I have hosted a media interview. We talk about the hygienic problem caused by using septic tanks in rural villages because there was no connection with the public sewage system. So this may be an opportunity for improving the rural sewage system. Now, paragraph 14 of the paper says that 40 or 50 more villages will be included in the plan to improve the sewage system. That's great, but I have a question. For existing villages which are already included in the sewage improvement plan, that includes 8 villages in Canteen. There is still not a timetable for improving the sewage system in those 8 villages. So can we have a concrete timetable for villages already included? Can you also give them a timetable? Now, another question. Last week when the black rainstorm signal was issued, there were serious flooding incidents in Dinola in Yuen Long. Now, the government said there will be more advanced measures to prevent flooding. For example, making the riverbed deeper. Now, will there be short-term measures to prevent flooding in case of heavy torrential rainfall in the future? Secretary. Chairman, the paper says we have identified 40 to 50 rural villages. For possible connection with the public sewage system when we are developing the new development areas. Now, these will be delivered by phases. We will share the timetable with members when we have a plan. Concerning black rainstorm signal, according to our experience, we can always learn something after torrential rainfall incidents. For example, in Taguling in the North District, we have gained some experience. Immediately, the Drainage Services Department has immediately come up with short, medium, and long-term measures. Now, the same applies to Yuen Long. We can always learn something from each torrential rainfall incident. Now, this is my turn. I have 2 opinions and 1 and 2 questions. First of all, the fund mainly targets private land and private properties. Now, if a project costs $10 billion and lasts 3 years, these may be heritage trails or other large-scale developments. So very often, these would be government land or government properties. So I suggest that the government should not rule out any application. Second, for new territories exempted houses, that is small houses, there are already existing schemes to convert these small houses. I understand that there are lots of fire services requirements to comply with. So we should facilitate the application as much as possible. Now, concerning the fund, there's only $5 million available in the second half of the year. So I don't think you would grant approval to any $10 billion application. So does it mean that in year 2027, it is still a preparatory period? You don't expect to grant approval to any major funding projects. The second question is about the guidelines. The guideline will be published by the end of this year. So when the guideline is published, would you consult the panel first, or will you publish the guideline directly? Chairman, concerning your opinions, we do not limit the use of the fund to private land only. If an applicant is applying for a funding on government's land, then we will not rule out these applications right from the start. And also concerning small houses, it is difficult to establish a standardized guideline, but we do not rule out granting funding proposal for small houses. On the cash flow, now even if we grant a funding proposal for $10 billion next year, we will disperse the funding in batches. For example, we will disperse 20% initially, and then we will disperse the remaining parts after certain milestones have been achieved. Now, concerning the guideline, we do not have planned to consult the members before we publish the guideline, but we will be happy to do so. So we will share the drafts with members in due course. Thank you. That concludes the discussion for this item. I seek members' views. Do we support the submission of this funding proposal to the Finance Committee? It is passed. Thank you, government officials, for attending the meeting. The last item. Any other businesses? There being no AOB, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.